Hello, welcome to Postcolonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I'll briefly talk about two kinds of intellectuals, the foundational and organic intellectuals. And the reason is that, you all are trying to be scholars and we all hope to accomplish something in the world. But it's important to understand where do we stand as scholars, right? And what kind of different scholars are there that we need to be aware of. Now, the concept of the organic intellectual obviously comes from Antonio Gramsci. And I'm not going to delve into the details of how he articulates it and how he theorizes it because it is done with reference to the subaltern classes and how within ideology, in Gramsci's reading of ideology, how within that ideology sometimes the intellectual classes can cross over into the proletariat and working classes and work in solidarity, and that's the intellectuals that he calls the organic intellectuals. The concept of organic intellectual also is in Gramsci about the working classes or the subaltern groups developing their own intellectuals who understand their lived conditions from a class perspective and then explain it and open it up to the rest of the classes. But part of it is any intellectual who is an organic intellectual will align his interests and his praxis with the oppressed people, with the subaltern classes, learn from them, and then with that learning, work alongside a constituency, alongside a group of subalterns, and fight for their rights, and mobilize his or their entire repertoire of knowledge, resources, writing, public speeches, the entire praxis around the interests of the subaltern classes. Those are the organic intellectuals. Now, if you see in the window, my kitty cat is helping me with this lecture, and his name is Arjun. He's pretty famous. Now, Edward Said, I think, and I'm missing the name of the book where he discusses it, he discusses the concept of the foundation intellectual in opposition to the organic intellectual. And for him, the foundation intellectuals are those who have made their knowledge available in the service of the powerful. These are the people who use their knowledge and their expertise to support the existing dominant regime, the existing order. Of course, Gramsci discusses these intellectuals as well. Their interest then is overdetermined by their connection to the dominant group, to the dominant ideology and the dominant class. And these foundation intellectuals, you can find them anywhere if they become part of a system, large or small, and then start modulating their thoughts, their actions, and their writings, whether knowingly or unknowingly, in support of that particular system, they then can be called the foundational intellectuals. And it is important to make that distinction because there are immensely powerful scholars anywhere in the world. What is important to know is whether or not they are organic intellectuals or foundational intellectuals. It doesn't matter how progressive their thought might be. If they are not criticizing power and if they are not aligning themselves with a constituency of a subaltern group or a struggling group, then chances are their work will not have much of an impact. And it would keep propping up the divide that might exist in any given society. Now remember, if you come to it through Paulo Freire, Freire would already tell you is that being neutral is no choice. Because as a scholar, if you're being neutral, that means you're for the status quo. and the status quo is always in the favor of the dominant classes. So most foundational intellectuals obviously either will be directly in sympathy with the status quo, or will not even be aware, since they are busy being neutral, that their work in one way or the other props up the very order in which they exist. So roughly speaking, without going into the deep philosophical debates about the role of the organic intellectual and the foundational intellectuals, the distinction is that an organic intellectual, whether or not they live amongst the people, right? In Gramsci, they were the ones who rose up from the people or lived with the people. I think we can even say that it doesn't matter. They could be at the most prestigious institutions. For as long as they make one with the cause of a subaltern group, or stand in solidarity with a group that could use their help, learn from them, and then along with the people articulate their point of view and develop a praxis with them, regardless of whether they have a privileged position in the world, they are working in solidarity across the class divide with a group who can teach them and with whom they decide to fight. These could be called the organic intellectuals. On the other hand, intellectuals at privileged locations, think tanks, universities, who constantly keep articulating the dominant point of view, maybe on economics or politics or power politics, and who lend their knowledge to normalizing the narratives of the powerful constituencies, are the ones that could be called the foundational intellectuals. So these are the two kinds of intellectuals. The question for you and me and for everyone else who does humanities is to ask ourselves, what kind of an intellectual identity are we performing? To know the difference, and then do some introspection and ask ourselves, whose side are we on, right? Are we foundational intellectuals or organic intellectuals or something in between? So these are some of my thoughts on this topic. I will try to see if I can reread Gramsci and then maybe record longer versions of his conversations on the concepts of hegemony and the role of intellectuals. But for right now, I thought I should at least share these thoughts. Let me know what you think. I hope this was useful to you, and I hope you are staying safe and taking care of each other. I will now see you next time. Until then, as always, peace and love.